morning. Good morning. I had to apologize to Jesse for starting It Is Well With My Soul before he wanted to. But that hymn and all of those songs are so great as they exalt our Father. And I'm so excited to be in our study of Romans this week. And we kicked it off last week, and the theme of Romans is righteousness. That's why we titled this series Just Right, because it is just right when we think about who God is. God is just right. No matter what we feel, no matter what's going on around us, no matter even for some of us when we think his timing's just a little off. Do you ever feel like that with God? God, I can trust you. God, I know you're good. It's your timing that I have to deal with at times. You don't do it on my timetable. I have to, this 4-letter word in Scripture, wait. But when we see what Romans says about God and his righteousness, and not only his righteousness, but how he gives us that same righteousness through the gift of Jesus, his son, we see that not only is God just right in his goodness, we see how he made us just right by his grace. So in talking about just right, it's an incredible look at the righteousness of God. You know, this grace of God that is able to uphold his holy, perfect standard. Titus 2 says, "For the grace of God has appeared, bringing salvation to everybody that believes, teaching us to live righteously right now on this planet." This grace that upholds his standard is the same grace that invites the sinner to become righteous. It's all by him, and that's why the theme of Romans is righteousness. We saw last week that Romans 1:17, "For the righteous shall live by faith." Today we're going to see, although God is just right, and in Jesus Christ he can make us just right, we're going to see what sin did to the world and to us. In fact, sin made everything just wrong, and we're going to see that. But even in looking at that, and Romans 1 is not an easy or fun passage. But even as we look at it today, I want you to consider something with me. I want you to consider that his ways are not our ways. That God is different than us. See, when we think of unrighteousness, when we think of sin in the world, when we think of those who perpetrate sin that causes pain towards people and towards us, towards others, when we think of that, we think about how we would enact our righteous judgment and our righteous standard according to the sin that's happening. We're going to see today that God absolutely is going to enact his righteous standard against all the sin and evils of sin. But he's different than us. He's way different than us. That's why Isaiah says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, nor are your ways my ways." God is different. He thinks differently. He's infinite. He's got the whole picture in mind. We have a microcosm of a moment in time where we're trying to assess and analyze and evaluate and figure out life right now. It's like walking into a movie right in the middle and trying to figure out what's going on, and you don't know how it started. You're not sure how it's going to end, and you're asking what is going on. That's how we think. But God knows the beginning and the end. He knows what's going on. That's why he says, "Put your hand in mine and trust me." When he says your ways are not my ways, it's not so much a rebuke. It's an admonition of who he is to us. Have you ever lost your way? Have you ever tried to figure your way out of something? God says, you know, probably the way you try to do that might be different than the way I want to do that. We don't have to evaluate and analyze and rationalize and justify anymore. We put our hand in his. And he says, "For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and my thoughts than your thoughts." This is the one that I struggle with. Knowing that God's ways are different than mine is not such a struggle. That's obvious. How many times have you said something like, "God, why don't you just," and then you can fill in the blank, change the situation, change this person, add to this, subtract from that. We're all the time asking God, petitioning God to do what we think he should do, which is proof that we think if we were in his position that what? We could do it better than him. I know it's scary to admit that in church. You think lightning's going to strike. You think he's going to get you. He's not. The very passage we're looking at tells us he knows your thoughts and your thoughts aren't as high as his. He doesn't expect anything more from you than our immature thoughts about him. He's not beating us up for that. So ask God what you want. You can say, God, if I were you, I think I would do it this way. If I were you, I would have done it on this timetable. God's not threatened by that. When my kids tell me, Dad, I've got a plan for our vacation. I say, oh, you do? Tell me about your plan. And it's extravagant. And then they ask me, hey, Dad, doesn't that sound awesome? And I say, yes, that sounds awesome. Dad, you wouldn't want to do that? Oh, I would love to do that. And then I ask them, how much do you think that costs? And guess what they've never figured out? How much it costs. So when I tell them we can't afford to do that, or that's too much money, or do you know if I do that, then Olivia, then we won't have a wedding for you one day, or, it's a give and take. When I tell them that, they say, but wait, you don't like this plan? No, the plan sounds great. What if we're the kid with God? What if when God has this incredible universal plan that he's known from beginning to end, and we're in the middle of it as little kids? He's okay with that. He's okay with that. But we're going to see today how differently he thinks about some of the things that are going on in our world. Father, we look to you today through your word, through this first chapter of Romans. We thank you for your word written to us and your heart for us. We ask that you would be glorified, you would speak, you would use this time to bring all of us, child of God and those who are asking about who you are alike, to the realization of just how good you are, even through a chapter that tells us just how bad sin is. We trust you for that in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Romans chapter 1, we left off at verse 18. It says, for the wrath of God is revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth and unrighteousness. And right off the bat, I want to say, is it okay in a grace church for us to say that God has wrath? Is that okay? Now, I know so many of us that come from these religious backgrounds where it looks like God's wrath is this certain flavor, it's this certain style of God's anger where he's hailing fire and brimstone from heaven all the way to earth so that he will capture and captivate and hit his target of you and me according to sin so that his wrath will be seen and known. And if you don't believe that's what is happening now, then we look at one future event called the judgment where God will finally enact his final wrath and finally be justified because God's really angry. Is there any meeting place? Is there some happy medium between this God who is spontaneously combusting in his anger all the time because of the sin of man and this grace of God that sometimes says, well, that can't be consistent with anything about the grace of God? Can these two be harmonized? Can they be reconciled? Well, Romans 1 says there's wrath from God. So then it would behoove us to define wrath. What is it? Well, the Greek word here for wrath is not this explosive anger that we typically think of when we think of the word wrath. It's not this explosion of anger. It's this intentional passion against all that is unloving. That's the wrath of God. If I could say it this way, I would say, because of my love for my family, anything that is against or hurts my family, it's only reasonable to assume that I would not like that. I would have anger towards whatever hurts those I love. This is God's wrath. It's not this vindictive, punitive, venge-seeking, angry God that the world is so scared of, that the church is so scared of, that we think if we take a misstep, we're going to be the target of his wrath. And we fail to realize that wrath is not a competing characteristic or attribute to God's love. It's actually the other look at it. I love this quote by Chuck Swindoll. He says, his wrath is nothing less than a reasonable expression of his righteous character and his unfailing love when confronted with evil. I like that. I like the word reasonable. It's only reasonable to assume that a God who is love would have anger towards anything that is unloving. Doesn't that make sense? But back to our verse. This wrath of God, notice it's in the present tense, is revealed right now. Now, this was written 2,000 years ago. So what does his wrath look like? It's not fire and brimstone. It says it's revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth and unrighteousness. So God's wrath, his justified, reasonable anger because he is love, is not against people so much. What does it say? It's against the sins and the evil of people. Why? Because the sin hurts people. Because the wage of sin is death. We were made for life, and God loves us, and he wants to bring life to us. And anything that doesn't bring life to us, i.e. it's sin, God doesn't like. I love that. He cares about you. He cares about me. And anything that doesn't care about you or care about me, God really cares about. And he's going to do something with it. It's being revealed. So wrath defined, it's not competitive with love. We've got to stop looking at God in a dual sense, in a either or sense. He's either wrath or he's love. He's either mercy. Maybe I should do mercy on that side, huh? But we look at him like with this competing attribute. We think that his mercy can't be reconciled with his holiness. We think that his love can't be reconciled with his wrath. We think that his righteousness can't be reconciled with his forgiveness. If you mess up righteousness, what does God do? Well, he forgives you. Well, he's righteous, he's holy, he's just, but he's also forgiving, loving, and merciful. We think that his justice can't be reconciled with grace. Grace is the idea that you could never earn something. God's freely going to give it to you when you don't deserve it. That's grace. Justice says you get what you deserve. If you don't deserve it, why would you get it? That's not just. We yell this all the time. My kids say this all the time. That's unfair. So the church that clamors for God to be just, righteous, and holy, but doesn't understand that he's good, merciful, loving, and gracious, sees God in this competitive way. Like he's got parts of him that are towards us and parts of him that are against us. They're not competing attributes. God's love and his mercy and his grace and his kindness and compassion do not compete against his holiness and his justice and his righteousness and his wrath. You will never understand his righteousness, wrath, holiness, and justice unless you understand that he is love and mercy and grace. His attributes don't compete against each other. They complete the idea of what he is like. It's not a contrast. It's very consistent. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And that's why when we see the wrath of God, we shouldn't instantly think about a finger pointed and an angry, explosive, fire and brimstone God. We should think when we hear the wrath of God, we should think about his love for all of us and his anger towards anything that isn't for all of us. He's good. Notice it says, men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. What does that mean? We think, well, God, you didn't tell somebody about you. It's your fault that somebody doesn't know about you. What if they didn't grow up in church? What if they don't have a Bible? What if they're living in some remote island somewhere and they never had a chance at knowing you? Why are you saying that they suppress the truth? You're unfair. Well, we keep reading. For God did not send the Son. We think that God is judging people because they don't know him like that. I want you to consider something with me. What happens to the person on this remote island? What if they've never heard? What if you didn't have an opportunity to go to church? What if you don't have a Bible? How do we know? How do we know that God has made himself known? Verse 19, look what it says. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. That which is known about God is evident, it's obvious, it's on display. Why? To us, to all the world. This is called general revelation. What has God revealed to all of mankind? He's revealed himself through creation. That you can look up at the stars and the moon, you can look at a tree, you can look at earth, you can look at mountains and the beauty that's been created here, and you can say at least this. If you can't say that that's God, you can say at least you didn't do it. This is what he means when he says he made it evident to us. The Bible says that the rocks will cry out if we don't worship him. Why? Because his glory is evident in what he has created. So God has made it evident to people. But look what he says. He has also made it evident what? Within people. I love this part. I think the greatest defense of the gospel, the greatest apologetic that there is, that God is real, has nothing to do with facts and science. I'm not saying it goes against facts and science. I'm just saying it has nothing to do with that. The greatest proof of the reality of God is that no matter who you are, and no matter where you are, no matter where you're from, no matter what your gender, no matter what your ethnicity, no matter what your sex, no matter what your social, economical background, no matter where you live or come from or your belief system, everybody wants to be loved. Everybody wants those heart-wired things that Kevin was saying during communion, to be loved, to be secure, to be valued, to belong, to be accepted. That's universal among mankind. It doesn't matter who you are, where you are, what you think, what you believe, or any of that. That's universal. The idea of God is not some foreign concept for anybody, even the atheists. They don't struggle with the idea of God, they just reject God. He has made it evident within us. We want to be loved. That's the evidence of a designer who is love. God has made it evident to them. He's made it evident within them. And notice that it says, for since the creation of the world, it's always been like this since creation. His invisible attributes, invisible means not seen. You can't see his attributes. But then look what he says. These attributes are his eternal power and his divine nature. His power and his good nature, they have been clearly seen. So that which was invisible is now clearly seen by what? Being understood through what has been made. Okay, God, I see that there's a mountain over there that I didn't make. There's this desire to be loved inside of me that I didn't create. I put this together. I start understanding. And then I start to see this eternal power and divine nature of our good God. I see it, Lord. You've made yourself known. And God has not withheld himself from anybody. God doesn't play hide and seek with people he loves. He doesn't do that. We think that we've got to walk through some spiritual, religious hoops, some sort of spiritual Olympics for this holy, righteous God to finally reveal himself. That's the lie of the enemy, getting people to think you're missing it, you're missing it, you're missing it. Romans 1 is telling us not only to the church, because this is just general, there's no name of Jesus yet here. This is just God, this being, this creator, without a name yet, revealing himself to all his creation so that men are without excuse. I hear this question, well, people didn't get the same chance you got, Tim. They didn't get the same one, but they got one. They got one. Notice who the onus is on. If somebody rejects the truth that God has revealed even through creation, do you realize if you have enough truth to suppress it, you have enough to receive it? We think, oh, they need more, they need more, they need more. If they've rejected what they've received, what they've seen, then it's actually God's goodness and grace not to give more for them to reject. Do you see that? So we see a God who is making himself known. And then when general creation doesn't do its job, we're going to get there in chapter 3. God's going to make himself known specifically through the person and life of Jesus Christ. We'll get there in a few weeks. But until then, it is man that is without excuse. It is man that needs to know and see the evidence around him and within him, and then acknowledge there is a God. I want to go back to something. You saw me skip it here. When we think about this wrath of God, that he's out to get people, we all know what John 3:16 says. You know that verse, right? We see it at football games, all kind of stuff. Well, we used to see it at football games. Now you just see these fake fans. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son, that who believes in him should never perish but have eternal life. But John 3:17 says this. It says, for God did not send the Son into the world to judge the world. We're asking God, what are you like? God, what are you doing? Why did you send Jesus? He didn't send Jesus to judge the world. He didn't send Jesus to bring condemnation. Some of your versions will say condemnation. He brought Jesus into the world that the world might be what? Saved through him. This is the work of God. What does God do to a lost people that reject him? He sent Jesus so that they could be saved. We think he sent Jesus so that Jesus would then condemn them. Do you see that his ways are not like our ways? When somebody hurts us, when somebody rejects us, when somebody goes against us or those that we love, how do we want to enact our power? How do we want to enact our nature? How do we want to enact our attributes towards that person? It's way different. God says, when people reject me, when they rebel against me, whether it's rebellion or religion, they're both rejection. He says, when people do that, I sent my son, not to judge you. We're going to see why he didn't send to judge, but to save you. Do you know why God didn't send the son to judge you for the sin? Keep reading. He who believes in him is not judged. He who does not believe in him has what? Been judged already. See, the judgment, the condemnation came the moment that Adam and Eve failed to believe God and take him at his word. God said, the day that you do that, the day that you say no to me and yes to anything else, it will be death. Not God's punitive nature to kill you because you disobeyed. That's not what happened. But for you to reject God, Adam and Eve, would be to come under one who is not a life giver, but who is a death dealer. That's what the enemy is. That's what Hebrews says Satan is. He is a death dealer, literally in the Greek. He's the card dealer of death to mankind. God sent Jesus to rescue us from that. The wrath of God is to be against all the ungodliness and unrighteousness of those who are trapped in sin's entanglement, so that Jesus would then come and rescue us from it, because God loves the sinner. God loves people. And yet the righteous church thinks that we're gonna somehow be diminishing God's righteous character if we love sinners. More on that later. Romans 12. When we think of vengeance, how do you think of vengeance? How do you think of revenge when somebody wrongs you? I know, because I know me. I know how I feel about that. I know what it stirs up in emotions in me. I know what it makes me want to do when somebody wrongs me. It makes me want to fight back, but I'm not so big physically. It makes me want to fight back either vocally or most powerfully behind the scenes, where it's gossip and things like that. It makes me want to win. You ever feel like that? It makes me want to pay them back. When it comes to that, God says, I understand this about you. He says, never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God. Oh, good. God, you're perfect and holy. You're stronger than me. Leave room for your wrath. Okay, I'll lay my wrath aside as long as you're going to do it much better than I would have done it. Go get them, God. I've read the stories. You can turn people into salt. You can make them be swallowed by the earth. You're good at this wrath game. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. So he's going to do it. Wait a minute. God has vengeance? Yes. But his ways are not our ways. Keep reading. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him. And if he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap burning coals on his head. Do not be overcome by evil. Overcome evil with good. Is that amazing? His ways are not like ours. When we think of payback and vengeance and getting people back, God says, I'm going to do that. Don't you try to do that. Because he knows when we try to do it, it will be in a way that's not like God. Do you see? Maybe we have misunderstood that when we talk about God's wrath and his vengeance and his judgment, we have only thought about punitive things. We thought about punishment. God is not punitive like that. He's a redeemer. His revenge is to feed his enemies, to love them. And in so doing, you might bring them to a place where they realize they're rejecting what shouldn't be rejected, which is unconditional love and goodness and mercy and grace. This is who he is. This is why it's so critical that we think of him based on how he says he is, rather than how we feel like or think that he might be. I'm going to read, I didn't put them all up on here. Verse 21, for even though they knew God, they did not honor him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculation and their foolish heart was darkened. What does that mean? Mankind, even though they knew God, they didn't honor him. They didn't recognize him. Literally in the Greek, they didn't glorify him. And then it says they didn't give thanks. There's an implication here. If we would recognize God for who he is, the natural outflow would be that we would give thanks. It only makes sense. It's only reasonable because he's good. Verse 22, professing to be wise, they became fools. Man, can we agree with that statement on what sin has done to fallen mankind? Look at the wisdom of this world, how foolish it is. Look at what's being offered today in many respects in terms of our world, our country, our communities, and it's the wisdom of this world and its craziness. Professing to be wise, they became fools and exchanged, they switched, they swapped the glory of the incorruptible God for an image in the form of corruptible man and of birds, four-footed animals, and crawling creatures. Notice what's here. You can't just reject God without exchanging God, the true God, for something else. You were designed and made a worshiper. That's why verse 24 says it. Therefore, God gave them over. Why? Because the worshiper that he created exchanged the true God for something that could be created. I don't know if you believe this. We said this last week. The true freedom of a Christian or a human is not that you can be independent. That's the lie from the garden. God doesn't create anybody independent. God alone is independent. He relies on no one because he is life himself. But he loves everyone and he offers that life to us. So he created mankind dependent, needy. It's not wrong, it's not sinful to be weak and needy. It's designed that way so that the all-powerful, loving one would be the one who meets the need. He designed you as a worshiper. People are not going to get away from worship. Even the atheist worships themselves or something that has been created. Everybody worships. Everybody was designed for worship. That's why if you reject God, you don't just worship nothing, you exchange that worship for a false worship. Maybe we don't struggle with with things like birds and four-footed animals, and maybe we don't struggle with idols that we think of in terms of wood carvings and stuff like that. We struggle with the idols in our lives of comfort and convenience and thinking that we can be self-reliant apart from God. We struggle with many things that we create as idols. And anything that's an idol is sitting in the place in your life where God sits. We've exchanged that. So what did God do? He gave them over. Put simply, God's wrath is his honoring the choice that man makes, even if it's rejecting him, even if it brings sin. That God so loves you that he will not force by his power your choice, because love cannot be forced. It's got to be free. I am stronger than Catherine. I am. But even in my strength, I had to invite her to a marriage with me. I couldn't bop her over the head and conquer her and take her by force. That's not love. Do you see how God restrains his power as he invites us by his love? His love is his power. So it's not really restrained, it's expressed. And he's not going to force it. And if man rejects it, God it's not that he doesn't care. It's not that God says, oh, that's good. Oh, that's fine. I got plenty of other people. God grieves that. He loves everybody, but he will not force them to come to him. So God gave them over. That's what his wrath is. It's the releasing, it's the removal of his power to let people do what they choose to do. But even in that, do you see that God loves us so much that he's not going to re-engineer the script? We would like him to. We ask all the time, God, if you're so good, why don't you stop this, this, and this from happening to people? And God says, one day that will stop. But today I need it to finish its course so that people will see how crazy and foolish sin is and this choice is, so that they will make another choice as his expression of love through Jesus Christ is offered to the world. You want a better way? You want a different way? So God gave them over, verse 24. In the lust of their hearts to impurity, that their bodies might be dishonored among them. They exchanged the truth of God for a lie and worshiped and served the creature rather than the Creator, who's blessed forever. Amen. Just as far as we get today, this is what happens to mankind when they reject God. God lets them. See how God gets the blame for so many things? When in fact, God is inviting all people to himself. So as Paul penned these words to that church in Rome, there would be Jewish believers and Gentile believers sitting there. And now he's writing this letter, and I want you to notice, and you'll see it next week, the pronoun, the address, who he's writing this portion of the letter to. The pronoun is they. What do you think the religious people, the smug ones, when they were hearing they've rejected God, they suppressed the truth, they have been turned over to their sinful ways, they've degraded their bodies, they're foolish in their thinking, their minds are dark, they have impurity in their actions now. They've given themselves over. What do you think the religious people think about those people that do that? They point a finger. Yeah, they do that. You see the Pharisee in that? Look at them. They deserve it. Thanks, God. Give them over. Teach them a lesson. Bring that wrath. Bring that vengeance. Hail it down on them, Lord. That's what they deserve. Can you imagine sitting in the pews of that Roman church and hearing that if you were a faithful, God-fearing Jew, and now these once pagan Gentiles had been invited to the gospel, and now by faith they received the gospel? Can you imagine the tension that would be present there? When you had this formerly rebellious group and now you had this really religious group? As though God wants to move us from rebellion to religion. Please hear this. God does not want to take the rebelliousness of man and dress it up and just make it religious and rebellious. He offers a relationship through Jesus Christ. And next week, as we finish Romans chapter 1, a very sensitive, a very direct, and a very beautiful passage. We're going to see just what God's attitude is. In fact, I'll give us a little teaser. Even today, when we think about him, how he thinks about those who are lost, those who reject him, those who deserve whatever sin will bring to them. For the wages of sin is death. It isn't that it isn't deserved. Can I speak to the family of God for a minute? Can I speak to us? If we in grace can't see that God's attitude towards the sinner is not the same as his attitude towards the sin, then we will shine the wrong light on this planet. We will shine a light in defense of God's righteous character, and we will get in arguments and debates and conflicts with people that God loves, with the right motivation of trying to bring them to God, but trying to argue them to God by justifying how righteous he is and how unrighteous they are being. And that light, it's a light. It exposes something, but it exposes just as much in the person shining it as it does in who they're shining it upon. And that's a light that blinds people. That's a light that people want to stay away from, and they want to hide their eyes from it because it's too much. We were all made for love and acceptance. There is a way to express our conviction without pointing a finger. There is a way to tell the truth, but as Ephesians says, do it in love. There is a way to say, let me shine the light of Jesus, which is always a soft light. It does everything you want it to do. It exposes sin, it never condones it or agrees with it, but neither does it point a finger at the sinner. We need to hold our conviction with arms open wide instead of fingers pointed. It is not to diminish our conviction. There will be no love if you're not telling the truth. But they'll never receive the truth if you do it without love. I'm speaking to me. I'm speaking to you. Because this message that we carry, this gift of God's grace, is not just for those who have received it. It's for those still who have rejected it. Because maybe today for them is the day of salvation. Amen. So next week, stick with us as we kind of, as Frank likes to say, put on the seatbelt, get the car out of park, and really press on the gas. Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for the truth that sets us free. Thank you, Father, for your light through creation to show yourself evident to the ones that you love. Father, your light within those you created, this evidence that we are designed and desire love, that's evidence of you. Father, we thank you that your truth has been made known. Father, we trust you to so live within us and through us that the world that maybe we sometimes point a finger at, Father, as we open our arms wide with the love of God, we pray that the world would receive you. Father, that we would be ambassadors for your sake. That we would no longer seek to try to uphold your righteous character through debate and argument and conflict. For if the truth is going to divide, Father, we'll let it be because they refuse it, not because we didn't share it with love. Father, we ask this so that you might be glorified. And in so doing, Father, we give you thanks. Each one of us has a mission field where we live, where we work, where we play. Father, shine your light through us so that those who have rejected you might come to a knowledge of the truth as we share it in love. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen and amen. Thank you. We'll see you next week. Looking forward to Romans chapter 1 at the end.